Hello, my name is Rebekah.
And I'm Ariella.
And if you were to have asked me 10 years ago if I was going to be an entrepreneur, if I would start a kombucha company, I definitely was not heading in this direction. As a matter of fact, I finished university about 10 years ago, and I studied computer science. I saw myself probably having a career in the tech industry, or maybe even going to graduate school and becoming an academic. But over the next couple of years, I started working doing tech for businesses, and I realized that I was so much more interested in the creative side of running and creating a business than I was in the tech aspect of it. And so that's when I kind of realized that I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Hey everyone. So my journey started also about 10 years ago. That was around the time when I first got really into nutrition and health. And I initially was in college pursuing the creative arts, in particular performance, acting and performance. But while I was there, I realized that what had drawn me into that field was really understanding what makes people tick, what makes people feel better. And for my personal journey, because I struggled a lot with low energy, nutrition was a huge part of that. And so once I had, dived deep into that and healed myself, I really began to be filled with a passion to share that knowledge with others, and to, empower people with the ability to understand the signs and symptoms that their body is speaking to them. And so I too was never interested in business per se, but as it turns out, we want to be there reaching out to the people, and business ended up being the way that we found to touch lives and to create an impact through what we do.
In my early 20s, I spent some time learning about just issues that women face in the world. In particular, I read this book called Half the Sky, which is a book about different struggles that women face across the world, so in Asia, Africa, especially in third world countries. And I realized that there's just a huge demand for businesses that can create sustainable jobs and employment for women who want to work. And so when we were starting Atmosphere, that was a huge driving factor behind why we wanted to start the company. We wanted to create jobs for women. So when I was in college, I was a cross-country runner. I did a lot of long-distance running, and I was always interested in being as healthy as possible so that I could be as fast as possible at my sport. And one of the things that I started hearing about was this fermented food called kombucha, fermented beverage. And so I remember the first time I went to a health food market, I bought a bottle of kombucha, I drank it, and I immediately felt like lighter. Especially in my gut. My guts felt just lighter and more energetic than it had, and I realized wow, this probiotic is really amazing. It makes me feel good, but I was totally broke at the time, and that bottle of kombucha, I think it was in the United States, so it was $3.50, and I, at that point in time was I can't spend this for a bottle on a regular basis. And so I started, doing research and trying to figure out how to make kombucha. And that year I had a friend who joined our track team, and she was a kombucha brewer. She was already brewing kombucha, and she had actually spent some time interning at a kombucha factory. And so she taught me that winter how to make kombucha. She gave me my first SCOBY, she helped me get jars, she coached me through the process of brewing my first batch of kombucha, and it was completely magical. I really fell in love with the process. I loved watching the bacteria grow. I loved watching this kind of sweet tea turn into this fizzy probiotic beverage. And then of course I love drinking my kombucha and sharing it with people. What's pretty interesting is that when I first started brewing, I would use Indian black tea, that I had brought from India to college in the United States to make chai with. So I would use that tea to make my kombucha. And so all of my first kombucha was really dark. It was very kind of more like strong and tangy and super fizzy. And I didn't start making green tea kombucha until much, much later. In my early 20s, I was living in Tibet, in a city sort of on the northeastern edge of Tibet. And I had a friend in that city who would make kombucha a lot out of really light teas, and she would make kombucha and she would make it like very, very palatable, and she would serve it at parties, she would serve it, to her children, she would serve it to different people. And that was the first time that I really saw kombucha being consumed as a beverage, not as a health tonic. And I was really inspired by that. So during that time I started buying lots of different Chinese tea while I was living there, and making, different kinds of kombucha with different teas and adding different fruit, and making kombucha that was not just a health tonic, but was also, a beverage that was really flavorful and really delicious. And, that was, I think, probably how, we started moving towards the kombucha that we have at Atmosphere today. So when we moved to Delhi, we started brewing kombucha primarily just for our own health benefits. I was working with Fab India, starting Fab Cafe, and I was very, very busy, had a very hectic lifestyle, and so kombucha just kind of became a refreshment that I would carry with me to work. I would carry it around, and I would drink it during the day to stay refreshed and to stay energized. And we started thinking about selling the kombucha, and when we decided that we wanted to start selling it, we started really diving deep into the taste, because at Atmosphere, making kombucha taste good is something that we really excel in. And we spent months. We ordered 50, 60 different teas. We tried different quantities of teas. We tried blending different teas. We tried mixing teas. We made these charts that had, a different tea versus how long we steeped it for, versus the color that tea ended up being, and then the flavor that it ended up creating. And we spent, months and months just experimenting with how to make the most delicious kombucha, because that's really what we wanted to bring to you in Atmosphere.
So I was working at an organic India wellness center at the time, and we had been making our own kombucha for our own consumption, and I started to notice more than 80% of the people coming in for consultations had IBS symptoms. And when I asked them, how they were getting their probiotics, they kind of looked at me confused a lot of the time. And many of them were actually lactose intolerant, so their main source of probiotics was yogurt, but they weren't sure if they were even digesting it very well. And so just out of curiosity and also care for my patients, I started bringing in extra kombucha. I would anyways bring in, a liter or so for myself and all of my colleagues, consumption on a hot summer day especially. It was so refreshing. And people started coming back and saying, wow, they noticed noticeable difference, and they felt lighter, more energetic, and a kind of calming down of their gut symptoms. And so it was around that time I realized the potential of kombucha, and people really liked it. They were liking the flavors that we were making. And so I just, on my way home from work one day, I stopped by my favorite grocery store. I bought him a couple samples, and he'd seen me a lot, and I asked him if he would take a chance on our product. And I was really nervous. I didn't know what he would say. He kind of asked, if anyone else was selling this and how well it was doing. And I noticed the one or two cafes that we were doing really well in. That seemed to be enough. After launching the store, we actually did extremely well there, and that also gave us the confidence and the experience, because we would collect feedback from what people said and what flavors people liked and what we're selling. And it was pretty interesting. Initially, we had launched, a nimbu pani kombucha or a nimbu kombucha, and a mango cardamom, as well as our blueberry, lavender, and raspberry. And the flavors that we thought would be really popular, like the mango cardamom, I was very excited about, weren't that popular. But the more floral, fruity infusions that were also more exotic, like the blueberry lavender, immediately they had an amazing response. People's first response would be when they tried it for the first time that it tasted like champagne. And they had this little quizzical look on their faces because for many people, this is the first time they're having a fermented food that perhaps isn't alcohol. But I think the benefits really speak for themselves, and people started coming back for more. Where can we get this on a regular basis? And that's how we built out the flavor profile as well, based on what people really liked. And we're excited to be bringing a beverage to the market that's accessible taste-wise. It tastes amazing. It's refreshing. People definitely feel the difference within a few days of trying it. Some people, especially on the first try, because when you do have an imbalanced bacteria and you're in need of probiotics, you're gonna feel visibly better the first time you have it. And that little kombucha buzz, or that happy high that we call it, is your gut speaking to you. And from a nutrition standpoint, the B vitamins that are in kombucha, especially B1, B6, and B12, are very common deficiencies, and they're very much needed for the body to make natural energy production, right, ATP. And so being very common deficiencies here, I would love explaining to people that if you have enough probiotics in your gut, a healthy gut can make its own B12 and its own vitamin K. And it's really about the knowledge that makes a difference, because we wouldn't sell a product that we don't believe in, and it's really a functional beverage.